All right, so everyone's talking about how challenging the upcoming couple of years are going to be from a budget perspective, and that means you need to take control of how dollars flow out of your organization. So, how do you do that? Well, it starts with the data, and specifically data on how, where, when, and with what frequency purchases are being made all across your various departments. You may or may not have a procure-to-pay platform that makes it easy to measure this type of activity, but to get you inspired, you should go check out Procurify's brand new Charter School Benchmark Report. It just came out a couple weeks ago and offers 10 procurement benchmarks from charter schools across the country, highlighting things like average PO volumes, spend per vendor, items per vendor, how long it takes to go from requisition to PO, and so on. Not only will you be intrigued to answer these same questions for your school, it might also shine a light on opportunities for cost control next year. You can go to procurify.com/resources to download a copy, or check out the episode description, and we've linked to it there as well. All right, now back to the show.
Welcome to Charter School Insider, lessons from the nation's top charter school operators, the only podcast dedicated to the behind-the-scenes business of running a successful charter school. Join us as we sit down with charter school leaders who share how they are overcoming the biggest operational hurdles facing their schools today.
All right, here we go. What you need to know to renegotiate your software contracts. All right, let me set the stage a little bit for this one. Why this topic? Why am I talking about this now? So, a little bit of background. We've had a crazy February and guest schedules have had to move around quite a bit. But what that means is we're preparing for an epic March with a bunch of really fascinating guests and topics. So you can look forward to that upcoming in a few weeks. But in the meantime, I've been having a lot of conversations with school leaders around cost reduction. Everyone's talking about the ESSER cliff and, frankly, other factors in the market that are impacting revenues, particularly as we're thinking about next school year, SY 24-25. So I thought I'd do an interesting kind of practical and tactical episode, as one of the things that came up as an opportunity for cost reduction in a recent conversation was subscription costs, particularly software subscription costs. So here we go. This is a mini lesson on if I was going to try and find $50,000 to $100,000 to trim out of my subscription software spend, this would be my process. Why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, my background is in the software space. So I worked in EdTech for a number of years after leaving the classroom and prior to joining BuyQ. And so I am familiar with being on the other side of the negotiating table, so to speak. So let's dive in. Here we go. If I was going to try and cut $100,000 out of my subscription software spend, this would be my process. Now, I have no idea how much your actual subscription software spend is. It's going to depend on how big your school is, how many schools you have, if you're a CMO or a network. But here's a framework for really what you need to know to effectively go renegotiate these contracts. We'll assume, for the sake of this outline, that you want to keep these products. Obviously, if it's on the chopping block, that's a different conversation. But here is a 7-step process of gathering everything you need to know to go renegotiate these contracts and drive some cost savings for your schools. Here we go. Step 1, identify the right opportunities. Now, ideally, what you want to do is look through your software contracts, maybe organize them by size, usage throughout the school, and identify those that are really sizable in spend and particularly multi-year or up for renewal. So you want to look for those contracts where you're spending $25,000, maybe $50,000 or more in annual contract value, and you're locked in for a number of years, or your renewal is upcoming and you know that you plan to renew this contract. Ideally, you also want a contract that has a human tied to it. So some companies have moved to more of a self-serve model on licensing. If you licensed your product online through a self-serve experience, it's going to be really hard to renegotiate that because they probably have fixed pricing and there's not a lot of wiggle room or customization. So generally speaking, what you're looking for in your subscription spend are large ACV contracts, multi-year, tied to some sort of customization. There was an original contract that was negotiated. So that's step 1, finding the right opportunities. Not every contract is going to be ripe for renegotiation. Step 2, you need to gather the right data. So this is going to take a little bit of time, but if you're leading the charge on driving some cost savings through contract renegotiation, you want to do research on each of your identified contract opportunities, specifically with the main owner of that product or that department that uses that piece of software the most. So I would imagine most of your software products, there's an IT manager, but maybe also someone in instructional technology or on the academic side that's heavily invested in that piece of software. You want to meet with that person or send them a survey, and this is what you're looking for. Product value to that key department. Whoever uses this the most, how valuable is this to them? Is it in an oversimplified world, low, medium, high, extremely high? We would die if we didn't have this product. You want to understand the product value. Second, you want to understand actual usage. Sometimes there's a big difference in perceived value versus actual usage. Maybe you're licensing the product for the whole school and it's super valuable to your chief academic officer, but maybe only a few hundred students use it out of your 1,000 students because of a particular program or class schedule or what have you. So you want to understand what's the actual product usage. How many teachers, students, administrative staff use this product on a daily basis or annual basis? Third, you want to look at the intended ROI metric. Now, you may have an ROI metric. The company may have an ROI metric that they advertise on. You want to understand, why did we procure this piece of software in the first place? Like, what was the intended ROI? And then where are we against those goals that we set at the beginning of this partnership, relationship? Lastly, you want to look at future usage. So as I mentioned, we're talking about subscriptions that you plan on needing to continue to have. You really want to dig into, are we renewing this at a higher rate? Do we need more licenses? Do we plan on increasing our usage? You really want to understand kind of what's the future of this product within our organization. If you can track down those 4 things, product value, product usage, intended ROI, and future intended usage or ROI, that will give you the data set you need to lay the foundation for a strong renegotiation. Step 3, you want to understand the cost model. This is critical. Without understanding the cost model, it's really hard to properly renegotiate your costs down. So let me break down for you some of the typical SaaS, which just stands for software as a service, cost models, especially in the education space. Starting with kind of the most popular, which is the per license model. Sometimes this is called per pupil or per user, but the per license model is essentially you pay a fixed cost per license or per user, and you pay that on a monthly basis or an annual basis. Sometimes there's kind of a song and dance around what the real cost is there, because you can show a cost per day or a cost per month or what have you, versus the actual annual cost for that license. So you want to understand, if you are under this cost structure, is this cost per unique student? Is this an interchangeable license where licenses can be shared? Is there different tiers of licensing? Are there different types of licenses? These are some of the questions that you want to ask or better understand. Sometimes there's a host or like a teacher license versus a student license. You want to dissect, if you're under a per license cost model, everything that entails. So that's one example model. The next example model would be a per site subscription or per campus subscription. Essentially, this is the all-you-can-eat version, where you pay a cost for your entire school, and it doesn't matter whether 2 students or the entire staff use the subscription, it's the same cost. Generally, this is a blanket price, and the cost per campus might go down if you have 10 campuses or 50 campuses using the subscription. Cost model number 3 would be enrollment-based bands. This is where the economies of scale go up as you have more and more students or users for that product. So you might see bands of 0 to 200 students or 500 to 1,000 students. And so depending on where your enrollment is, your enrollment may have gone up or it may have gone down, depending on what you're currently paying and which band you're in. So you want to understand if you're under a band-based model. The last model, and this is less common, sometimes there's a component of this incorporated into some of the other models, is per usage, where you're actually charged based on the usage of the product. Most companies have moved away from this because it's a little bit silly to make you feel like you don't want to use the product to incur more charges. It's almost like working with your lawyer. How quickly can we resolve this so we don't have to pay that big hourly fee? Most companies have moved away from that, but you may have a component of your contract that's based on data storage or some other type of usage metric where your costs have gone up. So those are the four main models to look out for and that you need to understand prior to renegotiating your contract. One other thing I'll mention in this step of the process is taking a look at your actual contractual paper to see additional costs that were either one-time or ongoing that have nothing to do with the core licensing subscription costs. These could be things like maybe there's a core platform fee. Sometimes there's services fees that you originally paid for because you predicted needing them, maybe trainings, subscriptions for your teachers, integration services because there was a big integration needed for this product. You want to identify anything that is in kind of the additional costs bucket because those are going to be potential levers that you can pull for negotiating the costs down going forward. So that's step number 3, understand your cost model intricately. That takes us to step number 4, know the incentives. So last year at the National Charter Schools Conference, we hosted a roundtable for operations executives, and we had a guest speaker from UT Austin. So the conference was in Austin, and the dean of the Executive Business School, Dr. Galen Paulson, came and did a session on negotiation for us. Really fascinating session. I'll actually link to the slides from that session in the show notes of this episode. But one of the key points from his presentation was if you stay focused on just your goals and needs, you tend to get less. You tend to be a poor negotiator. Basically, if all you're focused on is, I need these 3 things, it's going to be really hard to gather the proper knowledge on what's going to motivate the other party to meet you on some of your asks. So if you just stay focused on your goals and needs, you don't get to where you want to be going. That begs the question, so what are the needs or the goals of our subscription providers that we work with? Let me try and break down some of the major ones. First, the biggest motivator for your subscription partners is going to be the threat of non-renewal. Basically, you saying, well, sorry, we can't renew this. It's too expensive. Why is that the biggest threat? Well, obviously, they don't want to lose you as a customer, but the entire subscription model is built on the idea that you can retain and add more customers than you will lose. That's how the whole model works. It's why it scales up really nicely. It's why software businesses are high margin. The whole model is essentially built on you being a customer year after year after year. The threat of non-renewal is very scary for them because it's way harder to re-win you as a customer than it is to renew you at a lower rate. So that's going to be the biggest driver for the account manager or customer success team that you're meeting with to renegotiate this contract. The second motivator is going to be timing. Timing is often a strong motivator when it comes to contracts because if you think about it from the other perspective, they are looking to know that you're going to continue to be a customer. And if they can do that sooner, they would love to get an early renewal. If they can renew you for longer, that's a key timing component. They don't want to have to renew you each and every year. And the other component with timing here is the executive team on their side is constantly trying to forecast revenue, just like you do revenue forecasting with student enrollments and donations and all of those things. They're doing that based on subscriptions and renewals. And being able to accurately forecast is super critical to the health of their business. So anytime you can get a renewal locked in early or know that the renewal is going to happen at a lower rate, even if it's a lower rate, that's a good thing. They want to know exactly what to forecast. So timing can be critical. The next potential incentive on their side is payment terms. Payment terms are one of those things that are beneficial, again, to their company, where if you can pay in full right away, that's better than waiting till your fiscal that starts July 1. If you can prepay for a future year, they will take that cash now instead of cash later. Time value of money. Anything you can do on payment terms to expedite actually paying for your subscription, that's an incentive and a driver on that account manager side. And then the last incentive or driver on their side is just going to be total margin. So thinking about, there are fixed costs to running a software product. Maybe those costs have gone up for that company since the last time you had a contract, and that's what's actually dictating the price. A lot of times the account manager that you're working with may not even know exactly what's dictating the price that they're allowed to give you, but they have to get sign off from, whoever it is that sets the price book at their company. And that's ultimately going to be based on how much it costs for you to use their product. So, step 4, understand the incentives on the other side of the table, because that helps you understand which levers you can pull that are favorable to them to make concessions for you. That takes us to step 5, knowing the asks and the gives. You need to know internally, so at your organization, at your school, what's important and what's not that important, what's maybe secondary. So you want to go back to that product owner or department head that loves this subscription and uses this product, and you want to talk to them about some of the things you've learned about the contract, the pricing model, the incentives, some of the data that you've dug into. And you want to ask them, what's super important? What here in the existing contract has to stay? What usage do we need? What additional services are we still using? And then you also, on the flip side, want to understand what was a total waste of money that first time we paid for it. Are we using that extra data storage package that they upsold us? Are we still paying their integration retainer fee? Are we doing more integrations or are we not? Are we kind of all set up? What's our internal capacity on training? You want to build a laundry list of asks. And then you also want to understand, what can you give them in return? So step 4 was to know what's important to that subscription provider, whether it be an early renewal or faster payment or any of the things we talked about. You want to know, what's no big deal to you all. Maybe you go talk to your finance team. Maybe you're already on the finance team and say, hey, do we have the cash to just prepay this for a year instead of being on monthly payments? And if you do, great. That's a give that you can add to your give column that you know will be valuable to them. So you want to have your list of asks and your list of gives that you're okay making concessions on. Now, that takes us to step 6, which is actually crafting this new deal or this new contract. And what you want to do is provide your full kind of laundry list of asks. And you can do this live on a call, which I would recommend. If you have to do it via email, you could do it via email, but then ask for a call to talk through it together. And you want to provide everything, knowing that odds are this subscription provider is not going to agree to all 10 of your asks. This could look something like, hey, we talked internally as a team. We like your product. We know we're going to continue to use it. But as we debriefed as a team, here's some of the things that we've decided we no longer need going forward. We only need 200 licenses instead of 400 licenses. We have in-house training capacity, so we don't need your additional teacher training. We didn't end up using that extra 200 gigabytes of data that we originally purchased, so you can remove that going forward. We are okay with renewing for 3 years instead of 2 years, but we'd like to request a 0% year-over-year increase to protect us against inflation. You get my point here. You could lay these out kind of line by line, knowing that if they said yes to everything, that would be amazing for you. You'd cut your costs by fill in the blank. But if they come back and agree to 6 out of the 10, it's still a big win for you. And so you want to provide your longer list, promote complexity instead of simplicity. This was another thing Dr. Paulson talked to us about, because it allows you to structure the new contract with way more creativity. If you only provide 1 or 2 things, it's really hard on both sides of a negotiation to get creative. Now, once all of that is put in writing, you want to have that final conversation with your account manager, have them come back to you and see where you land. My final recommendation on this is, if you agree to a multi-year contract or to faster payment or to something like that in your gives, follow through on that quickly. That shows that you're serious about this. That will make them want to follow through on their side. And it also leaves both parties feeling good about the path forward, which you want. You don't want your vendor partners to leave feeling like you took advantage of them or this was a frustrating negotiation. You want to move forward with a plan to make best use of their product in the exact way that you need it going forward, while also knowing that you cut some of the cost that you needed to for your organization's broader financial goals. That takes us to step 7, which is rinse and repeat. Each time you do this, my guess is you'll see some trends and you'll also learn something new in every negotiation. And that will build your skills as a negotiator, but also allow you to work through this process more quickly as you understand, different levers that you can pull, as you understand different contract types. And ultimately, over the course of a couple of months, you could easily renegotiate 10, 20, 30%, 50% out of some of your software subscriptions that frankly probably just haven't been looked at since the original contract was signed and you've done an auto renewal in a couple cycles. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope this was interesting to you. If it was, shoot me a note. I'd love to hear about it. My email is dcasselli@byq.org, or you can email us at podcast@byq.org. And secondly, if you're curious to talk about cost savings, procurement strategy, negotiation, and our organization, if we can support you, shoot us an email. We'd love to talk to you. So that's it. Different format for today. We'll be back with our normal episode styles, topical interviews with charter school leaders in our next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Talk soon.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting byq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@byq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.